Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, where today I wanted to try something a little bit different. This is the city of Brecon, which I have been building in Cities Skylines 2. As you can see, we've now got a population of over 125,000 people and have reached the Megalopolopolis milestone. Basically, this is the city that I have been building and experimenting in order to get to grips with Cities Skylines 2 and understand how it works. And what I thought I'd do today is take you on a tour of the city and show you some of my favourite and not so favourite features of this new city builder. Now, I've already done a first impressions video as well as a 1 month on video, which will be linked to on screen now and in the description. Go and check those out if you're interested. This is just going to be a much less formal video where I show you around the city and look at some of the things I like and loathe about this game. And yes, before anyone jumps in the comments, I should point out that this is a city I've been experimenting in. I haven't necessarily followed all of the road hierarchy rules correctly or thought about how things are going to flow and fit together. I've just been throwing stuff together to learn the mechanics of the game. But I feel I've learned a few lessons from playing, which hopefully I'll be able to apply when I start a new city at some point in the future. So this city started out as the Great Highlands map. I don't think I changed any of the settings other than turning on left-hand traffic. And here we are at that initial intersection and the bridge. As you can see, I've created a large industrial area over here with a massive landfill site in the centre of it. And I started building out the city from there. So these were the original neighbourhoods that I created here along the highway. And straight away we can start to look at some of the things that have been bugging me about this game. So for example, here at this junction you can see that the bridge over the highway isn't level. You also see all these sort of lumpy bumpy bits that go along here and across to where the bridge is. This just doesn't look very nice, particularly in a map that was supposed to be designed by the developers as your sort of starting location for your city. And just in case you thought I was responsible for the mess, this is what it looks like when you load up the map for the first time. And as you can see, it's a lumpy bumpy mess. It looks unfinished, it looks rushed. And I just don't think that makes a very good first impression. Anyway, I just don't think it looks very nice. And it still annoys me that there aren't tools to help snap one side of the road to the other and get them to be the same height. Yes, you can fiddle with them to try and get this percentage in the middle of the screen down to a reasonable number, but it's still a very fiddly job. I would imagine that most people who are building a bridge like this want it to be level on both sides, and it's annoying that there's no snapping tools to allow you to do that. If we travel across this initial neighbourhood, you'll see, I built some sort of houses down here which look fairly nice. We've got a cemetery, we've got a school, all fine and good, until we started building these row houses here. Now they're not too bad on this lower level, but as you can sort of see, the land starts to slope upwards quite dramatically, and despite taming it a little bit before I started building, we've got these sort of janky backyards going on in your terraced houses. So if you're going to build terraced houses or row houses like this, you really have to be careful about your terraforming, otherwise you end up with these really wonky gardens and dodgy lumpy bits. I think I've actually done a much better job if we pan over to the newest area of the city. You can see here I've got the terraced houses going in the other direction, and I think that looks a lot better, but it's tricky to get things to look nice with the terraforming tools that are available, and it's not always obvious how much difference in gradient there is between one place and another, partly because of this new, more realistic art style. Actually, while we're over here, I'll show you some of the things I'm talking about. So this, for example, is the vehicle factory, which is a specialised industry building that unlocks when you build a certain number of industry buildings here. And as you can see, it's bloody massive. This is a bit of a double-edged sword for Cities Skylines 2 for me, because compared to the first game, the graphics are much more realistic, and it is much more realistic that we have these big giant buildings in our city. And it's not just that. I say we've got our cemetery over here and our school over here, which take up quite a lot of space, certainly more than they do in the previous game. The problem with this is that it forces you to sort of do things in grids. If we look over here, you can see another primary school that I tried to build, elementary school, sorry. And as you can see, I tried to build it on a curved road, and it just doesn't look right. It just doesn't fit in. It's a very square building that is clearly designed to be part of a grid, and that doesn't work for these more sort of organic European styles of city. So yeah, definitely a bit of a blessing and a curse having this new, more realistic art style to the game. While we're on the subject of bloody massive buildings, let's just go and have a look over here at the International Airport, which I think is one of the biggest buildings in the game. And look how big it is. I mean, as a proportion of the whole city, it's bloody massive. How are you supposed to be able to fit that in and fit a sort of nice organic road network around it when it is a very square feature? And there's all this dead space here that isn't being used. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I do appreciate the fact that it is more realistic and that it does look better than some of the assets from the first game, but at the same time, as I said in my previous video, I'm not sure that they've got the balance between fun and realism right in this game. Anyway, having said all that about the ridiculously giant buildings, having things like this paper factory here to break up your industrial areas is actually really good. Otherwise you end up with areas that are quite repetitive, particularly if you just sort of zone the whole thing in and don't bother to sort of micromanage the whole thing. So here's an example of a place where I just built a little estate and zoned the whole thing for industry, and you just get sort of repetitive smokestacky buildings and it doesn't really stand out very much. Whereas this area over here looks a little bit more interesting because it's got this oil refinery and this electrical factory working over here to break it up and make it look a bit more interesting. So again, I'm still not sure how I feel about this, and maybe it's something that I will just get used to as time goes on. Yeah, here's an example of what I'm talking about. So when I was building this region and laying stuff in, I did it sort of fairly gradually, but you do feel tempted to draw in these sort of grid-like areas. And yes, you can fill in interesting bits like behind the elementary school over here, but it's just a little bit boring when everything's just grids all the time. But you feel naturally compelled to do that given the size and shape of some of the buildings. That being said, most of the buildings do seem to work quite well, so I've created this area over here, which is Cochrane Park, I believe. And here we've gone for a much more sort of organic street layout with sort of normal houses. And I think that looks okay, it looks quite good for the most part, even with the elementary school there on a bit of a curve. I'm also quite pleased with what I was able to do with the castle up here, although I have to say getting these sort of buttresses around the edge of the thing was a fiddly job. And really there should be tools that make it easier to put these sort of key walls and other features along by the side of your buildings, but never mind, you still can do great things if you're willing to be patient and explore how all the tools work. However, there are certain mods that I used in City Skylines 1 that I consider essential, and it is a shame that some of the features of those mods are missing in this sequel. Another thing that I think needs quite a lot of work is the feedback that the interface gives you about certain things. So for example, I've tried to build this little neighbourhood over here across the highway from our original junction, and as you can see we've got some row houses around the outside. The problem here is that I've laid out all of these areas as residential areas, and although it does say, this road is red because it's saying the residential suitability is bad, it doesn't tell you why. If you hover over it, it does say, we need workplaces and things, but it would be really helpful to understand what the problem is and how to fix it if I want to make that area better for my residents. Similarly, I don't think the game does a very good job of explaining why you have certain levels of demand. So you'll notice that most of the city that I've built, sort of from over here all the way across to this other river, is very low medium density. The only high density stuff that we've got is over here on the other side of the river in this small area here, but there's just no demand for it. And it sort of says, there's occupied buildings and taxes are a bit high, but I mean, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do to address those, given that I have already reduced the taxes for the well and highly educated people who apparently are the ones who move into the high density residential buildings. So it could be a little bit clearer about what's going on. Also, they promised us there would be no more death waves in this game, but look at all these people currently waiting for hearses to pick them up. And on the subject of the interface not really telling you anything, so if we go over here, there's a couple of buildings in this industrial district here that have been abandoned. It says it's been abandoned by its residents, and we can look and we can see that it's been abandoned, but it doesn't really tell you why it was abandoned. Without knowing why it was abandoned, it's quite hard to fix the problems that are causing it. So all we can really do is demolish them and hope that the new buildings that grow in don't have the same problems. Here I found, I think, a residential one. If we zoom in here, we can see this house here has collapsed due to lack of maintenance, presumably because the people who lived there weren't rich enough to be able to afford to maintain their house. But again, we don't really get information about what caused that and how to fix it. Certainly there's no one else in the area complaining. But I think the interface just needs some improvements, and hopefully that's something that will come with patches and updates over time. So here, for example, we've got a residential building that has become abandoned, and we can see that they were unhappy. But why are they unhappy? I mean, the air was polluted, but everything else was really good. Doesn't really tell you why the building was abandoned. So again, we just have to go in, demolish it, and hope that whatever grows in its place doesn't suffer the same problems. There you go, you see. At least that one's saying that the homes are too small. But, you know, it's low rent housing. What did you expect? Another area that I think needs quite a lot of work is the interface, particularly when it comes to things like subway lines. So if I want to run a subway line between two buildings, as you can see, there is a subway track under the ground there, but it's very, very hard to see. And I don't need to see the roads and the airport here when I'm trying to lay down my subway routes. What I'm actually interested in is this station, which you can barely see, and the tracks running through it, and it makes it very hard to do anything when you can't see what it is you're supposed to be doing. But again, hopefully that's something that I'm sure they've had plenty of feedback about, and hopefully they'll fix in an upcoming update. Similarly, when you're placing some buildings, so here, let's say I want to put a wind turbine in over here, I can see the wind strength here, and yes, I can see the name of the road where the highway is, but I really should be able to see the highway, as that's something that will block me from being able to put down the thing that I'm trying to place. I think these info views just need a little bit of work in order to better show off information that's relevant to what you're trying to do. I mean, why can't I see the f***ing road? Quite like the changes to how some industrial areas are laid out. So as you'll see, we've got all these different farms going on around here, and if I just quickly jump in here, I can show you how these are placed. So you put your specialist farming, chickens can go anywhere, and then you place the building, and then you draw out the area that you want your farm to occupy, and then it fills it in. And I think that's quite a good system that allows you to maximize space and create these slightly more realistic industrial areas. What I would say is that they're a little bit bland to look at, particularly from a distance, and it's weird that you can't tell the difference between a chicken farm and whatever that is, a cotton farm. Just goes to prove my point. More livestock, grain, veg. These are different farms farming different things, and yet they all look kind of the same and a bit plain and boring. I hope that's something that the developers or modders improve at some point in the future. But I do appreciate being able to draw out these areas and create these more realistic spaces. If I zoom over here, I've got a sort of quarry that I tried to build. We tried to make it like a sort of multi-layered bit where it actually looks like they've been carving stuff out of the rocks. I say I quite like it, but I think, again, it needs a little bit of work because some of these places, certainly when you look at them from above, are very sort of flat and they're not interesting. Now there are things you can do to make it look more interesting, so I've done some terraforming here to make it look more lumpy bumpy and more realistic, but still not too keen on how sort of bland these areas are. I'm just looking for some traffic. I've actually done a reasonable job of managing traffic in the city, although I'm discovering that so we've got roundabouts in the system now, and they are roundabouts that you can just plop in anywhere. So you can just select a roundabout, select a junction, and just plop it in, and it turns into a roundabout. And, you know, take them out again easily, which is great. But the AI doesn't necessarily seem to know how to handle roundabouts very well. You often get weird queues and people jumping around and changing lanes at the last minute. I'm going to try and find an example of that if I can. So one of the issues I'm having with the game, I think, is less due to the graphics and more due to the actual sort of simulation of the game itself. So you may or may not be able to see we've got the Steam FPS counter up here in the corner, and we're running at about 30 frames a second, which is fine. As I've said before, I can briefly show you, I am running on sort of mostly medium settings. I'll just briefly scroll down and show you. I've got a few things turned off, mostly running on medium, as you can see, and you know, we're getting 30-40 frames per second even while I'm capturing this video. But if we zoom in, you'll notice that the cars driving across the bridge are driving fairly slowly. They don't even seem to be going at full speed, they seem to be going in slow motion to me. And that's, as you can see down here, that's me going at 1 speed. I increase the game speed to 2 and to 3. It makes absolutely no difference, but I can hear the fans on my computer under my desk are going absolutely crazy. And if I bring up Task Manager, I can see that my CPU usage is currently at 100%. So I think part of the problem that I'm having with the specs that I've got on my PC is to do with the actual speed of the simulation. The simulation is running slowly, which is why all the cars They seem to be moving in slow motion. It might take a long time for anything to update after I've done any changes to the city or the road network. That's one thing that I'm hoping is going to be fixed when I upgrade my PC in a few months' time. But for now, it's just frustration that you sort of have to live with if you're running on a relatively low-spec PC. And if I haven't thrown up my specs already, I'll put them on screen now just to give you an idea of the kind of computer that I'm running. And actually, as you can see, there's a queue of traffic heading into the city here. It's about 5 AM, so hopefully we're heading into rush hour and I can show you some of the traffic problems I've been having. So yeah, I mean, we're getting notifications that there is a traffic jam here. But again, traffic is moving, it's just moving very slowly. There's nothing really blocking it, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Here's an example of a roundabout, and as you can see, the lanes are a little bit messed up, but mostly it seems to be working. I found the best solution here is whenever you've got a roundabout to always have asymmetrical roads going in and out of it from all directions, because that means you get dedicated lanes and reduces some of the traffic, but that doesn't mean that it's eliminated all of my problems. Now look, here we go. We've got some examples here of, there's a lot of traffic being caused by this roundabout because it's not quite behaving sensibly, but I'm sure, yeah, look, if you watch here, there's all these people coming down here and then changing lane right at the last minute, which is just getting in everyone else's way and causing more traffic. And yes, I know there are idiots who drive like that in real life, but just because it's realistic doesn't mean that it's fun and I want it in my city simulator. Oh, and while I do love that you can just place traffic lights or remove traffic lights if you don't want them on your junctions really easily with a single click with these new road tools, not a big fan of how they actually work. Let's have a quick look here. So I put traffic lights on this junction because people going this way and out of the city are blocking all of these people who want to turn right into here. But what's the point of having traffic lights on this junction if that direction and that direction are both going to be green at the same time? They're still getting in each other's way. It's annoying that you can't control this, or that they're not just sensibly programmed in the first place. One of the things I have to say I do really like is the way that they've improved the road tools so that you can do more complex and interesting things, like this intersection that I built here based on a Trump intersection. The ability to sort of add extra lanes to the road and then have them branching off and stuff like that is actually really useful, really powerful. It allows you to do all sorts of crazy things that you could only do with mods in the first game, things that you couldn't even do with mods in the first game. I do also love the fact that there aren't millions of different road types in here that you have to scroll through to find the one that you want, and that you can just go through, and if you decide that you want wide sidewalks or grass down the side of your roads, you can just stick them onto any old road to upgrade them. Again, this is just something that adds more flexibility to the game, and I think is a really useful and powerful tool that puts more power in the hands of the creators. The game would definitely benefit from some tweaks to the way that stuff is picked and generated, and possibly, some more models and variants of buildings, because, I mean, look at all these petrol stations that have spawned in along this road. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But deleting them doesn't seem to fix it, because there aren't any alternatives that fit the same size of plot. You also do get some occasional weirdness, so this delivery van here is currently blocking the road because it just snuck into the back of this, straight off the highway. Instead of coming into the town and dropping off at the actual shop itself, it sort of snuck in from the back. I mean, I know some people want to build back alleys for people to deliver stuff to, but really they shouldn't be able to do that, certainly not off a main highway. It'd be quite nice to be able to place fences down the back of there, but that's yet another feature that seems to have gone missing from City Skylines 1 and not been copied across to City Skylines 2. And then of course we have zoning, so zoning areas are much larger in this game than they were in the last one, giving you more space and in theory more flexibility to do things. However, it's annoying that here, for example, if I try and build houses in this bit, they're going to be on the wrong end of the road and completely different from the rest of the houses in that row. Not to mention the fact that not all the row houses are the same size and you have to keep demolishing them. That's a whole other problem. It's just annoying that you can't have control over the zoning. And what I really want to do is zone them along the road in the same way as the others. Particularly annoying when, again, this was a quality of life feature added to City Skylines 1, and so instead you have to faff around doing things like this in order to get houses where you want them. So that's it for now from my city tour and ups and downs from City Skylines 2, now that I've hit the Megalopolis milestone and unlocked pretty much everything in the game. And yes, I am aware that I've spent most of this video grumbling about various things. But I want to make one thing clear: my overall opinion of the game hasn't changed since my previous videos. Yes, there are things that need work. I do have a laundry list of issues that I would like them to improve, which includes better feedback on why buildings were abandoned and improvements to the info views, but there's nothing that I think is so broken that it is beyond repair. Colossal Order has also shown that they are capable of giving a game lots of love and attention after its initial release with the first City Skylines. which had its own rocky launch but blossomed into one of my favourite games over the years that followed. There is also a lot to love among the new features in the game, such as the more advanced road tools, and these things are brand new features which are bound to have some teething troubles, and I'm sure they will only get better as time goes on. And it is, at times at least, an impressive looking game, and hopefully some of the performance issues holding back the simulation more than the graphics will soon be fixed too. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't disappointed like most people with the game when it came out, but I think that's just because our expectations were so high. I remain optimistic about the game's future, and I can't wait to see what the developers and modding community build on top of this foundation. That's it for now. The question is, what do you want to see next? Should I start a new city from scratch and talk you through it? Should I do shorter top 10 tips style of videos? Let me know in the comments and I'll take that on board when I'm planning my next video. Thank you very much for watching. You know what to do if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next video.